Voyager 1, which has been traveling through interstellar space for more than 45 years and is trailing a long gray beard by this time, not really, it suddenly began to send strange signals to Earth. Even more bizarre, there are no signs that the probe has broken or anything. Scientists from NASA are desperately trying to find the reason. So, what's happened exactly? First of all, let me tell you a bit more about Voyager 1 and its long journey. Voyager 1 is an American space probe. Scientists from NASA sent it into space on September 5, 1977. Voyager's goal was to explore the outer planets of our solar system, namely Jupiter and Saturn. Initially, scientists assumed that the mission would take about 5 years. Haha, the joke's on them. The probe exceeded all expectations. Not only did it fulfill its mission, but it's still working for much longer than expected. Voyager 1 has been wandering around space for more than 45 years. It's hard to estimate what Voyager 1 has done for science. Firstly, it successfully sent a lot of photos of Jupiter and Saturn to Earth. By the way, you can even check out these photos yourself. All of them are published on the NASA website. Thanks to Voyager, we also discovered several new moons of Jupiter and a previously unknown system of its rings. We learned that Jupiter's famous red spot is actually a giant superfast storm. And after leaving Neptune's orbit behind, Voyager also sent a lot of important data about interstellar plasma. So Voyager 1 successfully proved to scientists how useful it was. After that, it happily headed for its next goal, the Kuiper Belt and the heliosphere. The Kuiper Belt is a ring of icy bodies that extends from Neptune to a distance of approximately 50 AU from the Sun. It's kind of similar to the asteroid belt, but about 20 times wider and 100 times heavier. And the heliosphere is an area around the Sun where the pressure of the solar wind is balanced with the pressure of interstellar gas. Yeah, I know, it sounds like some hard scientific stuff. Just keep in mind that this data really helps us understand the universe as a whole. So, this is Voyager's last task, to tell us more about interstellar space. The probe has already sent us more than 60 frames for a mosaic of the solar system from a distance of over 4 billion miles from Earth. Scientists use these frames to make a big colored picture. The photo was called the pale blue dot, and you've probably already guessed what that dot is. Yep, that's what our Earth looks like through Voyager's eyes. This photo clearly shows how tiny we really are, and how precious and fragile our planet is. But Voyager 1 also has another, even more important mission, to tell other civilizations about us humans. You might have heard about the famous Voyager Golden Records. People created many audio and video files and added them to these records. There are a few sections. The first one contains hello in 55 languages, including ancient and extinct ones. Almost 80% of the recordings are different musical pieces, like Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, and Stravinsky, folk music from different countries and ages, and a bit of the blues, like famous songs by Louis Armstrong and Chuck Berry. The remaining 20% of the recordings contain different human voices, sounds of nature and animals, as well as 116 images encoded as audio signals. There's also recordings of speeches by Kurt Waldheim, a former UN Secretary General, and Jimmy Carter, a former US President. These are just some friendly messages. In addition to the records, scientists also packed a needle for playing them. Don't worry, they also left a simple drawing that showed how to use all this stuff and how to translate the sounds into pictures. They added Earth's coordinates, which they created using a pulsar map. It shows the position of the Sun in the Milky Way. The record was packed in an aluminum case and covered with gold to protect it against radiation and cosmic dust. Carrying this record, Voyager 1 set off on its long journey, and it has already traveled quite a distance, I'd say. Right now, Voyager 1 is 154 astronomical units away from us. That's about 14.5 billion miles. This makes it the most remote human-made object. Initially, this title belonged to the Pioneer 10 mission, but Voyager overtook it in 1998. What a bargain for NASA! It's way beyond its best-by date. Voyager 1 is actually so cool that it even overtook its twin brother, Voyager 2, which, by the way, had been sent into space 2 weeks earlier. Voyager 1 moves at a speed of 9.7 miles per second. That's 35,000 miles per hour. Even the fastest sports car in the world travels at a speed of only 305 miles per hour. So it's hard to imagine the speed of Voyager. Anyway, at the moment, Voyager is heading to the borders of the Oort cloud. That's the name of a hypothetical layer of icy objects surrounding the solar system. Astronomers haven't confirmed its existence yet, but they're almost sure it's there. After all, even black holes were only a theory not so long ago. Unfortunately, Voyager 1 won't return back to the solar system. It'll keep in touch with Earth at least until 2025. But eventually, we'll lose the connection with it for good. In 300 years, it'll reach the borders of the Oort cloud. And in 30,000 years, I won't be around then, it'll finally leave the solar system. And if nothing happens to it along the way, in another 10,000 years, Voyager 1 will approach red dwarf star Gliese 445 in the Giraffe constellation. In the future, the probe will probably keep wandering around the Milky Way galaxy. And now, let's finally discuss the mysterious signals part. So, what happened? Well, a rather unusual thing. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which monitors and controls both Voyagers, reported this problem in May 2022. Our veteran spacecraft suddenly began sending strange data to Earth. The whole situation puzzles even engineers from NASA. Now, I bet you're thinking, come on, the thing just probably broke down or something. But the truth is that Voyager 1 is totally fine. It works as usual, receives and carries out commands from Earth, and collects and sends scientific data. But the readings of the AACS, which stands for Attitude and Articulation Control Subsystem, don't show what is actually happening to Voyager anymore. This system supports the orientation of the probe in space and helps it keep in touch with Earth. So, basically, the signals mean that the probe's orientation in space is messed up. But scientists claim this is not the case. They know that the source of the antenna signal remains in the same position relative to Earth as planned. The problem hasn't triggered any of the onboard fall protection systems. The probe hasn't even entered safe mode. So, what in the world, or universe, is going on? Suzanne Dodd, the head of the project, says that the problem is not actually that unexpected. After all, Voyager 1 is already 45 years old. The expert admits that what's happening to the probe remains a mystery to them. They don't know exactly where the incorrect data is coming from, and it's unclear how this will affect the operation of Voyager. She adds, though, that it's not that surprising, considering that the probe is in interstellar space. There's a very high level of radiation there. No spacecraft has ever reached that point before. Scientists from NASA say they'll keep closely monitoring the data coming from Voyager 1 until they figure out the problem. If they find it, the management team will try to fix it. Otherwise, the team will have to adapt to the new conditions. It might not be enough just to understand the problem, though. It takes as much as 20 hours and 33 minutes to receive the signal from Voyager, and it takes the same amount of time to respond to it. Well, at least the second spacecraft, Voyager 2, is totally fine, even though it's also currently in interstellar space at a distance of 12 billion miles from Earth. Anyway, we can only wait for news and hope that the problem will be resolved. I actually wonder how much longer can Voyager 1 last? Will it be able to fly to the borders of the Oort cloud in 300 years? What do you think? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. We still can't find the source of the mysterious signal we've been receiving since 2018. We receive it every 22 minutes and nothing can explain this. Some scientists even believe it could be coming from another civilization we haven't met yet. This strange radio signal wasn't found by a scientist on a serious mission. It was actually discovered by a college student just doing a regular project for school. Tyrone O'Doherty, an undergrad student at Curtin University in Australia, was sifting through old data of the southern sky. He was looking for any weird blinking radio signals. He finally stumbled upon one from 2018 that seemed to shoot radio waves towards Earth like a lighthouse beam. Excited about his find, Tyrone shared it with his mentor. radio astronomer Natasha Hurley-Walker. She dove into researching this signal, hoping for a breakthrough. But despite checking different frequency data, they hit a dead end. But then, Natasha spotted a pattern. The signal repeated every 18 minutes. This was huge. But just as they were gearing up to study it further, poof! The signal vanished after only 3 months, leaving them with nothing. Not giving up, Natasha and her team scanned the skies again, desperate for a clue. Months passed, but nothing turned up. They were ready to give up, and then suddenly, a new signal popped up. This one kept blinking for 5 minutes, then it disappeared. And then it came back exactly 22 minutes later. The main question was if that signal was related to an 18-minute one. To figure it out, Natasha went back to the old radio data from that area. As they dug deeper, they realized that, yes, and these signals aren't anything new. They've been beaming towards Earth for 35 years. Back in 1988, Indian and American telescopes had caught them, but they got buried under tons of other data. This was great news for space explorers because it meant they could now calculate how far away this mysterious object was. After doing the math, they figured out it was incredibly far, even on a space scale, 15,000 light-years from Earth. Now, the only thing left to uncover was what exactly this object was. Walker and his team started comparing it to all the known radio-emitting objects out there. Yet its source remains a mystery. The signals still pop up every 22 minutes on NASA screens, always ending with a frustrating match not found message. The scientists called it J183910. Some think that the signal might come from some extraterrestrial beings. Maybe it's the signal that SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, has been waiting for. This project has been working for over 50 years, trying to find any evidence of life beyond Earth. They also scan the skies for radio waves, laser pulses, and other mysterious signals. So maybe it's a way for extraterrestrial folk to communicate their location. While that idea may sound exciting, we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions. First, we don't have solid proof for that. Before any concrete evidence, it's just speculation. And also, there are other more plausible explanations. Most likely it comes from a natural phenomenon, and there are a couple of theories for that. The first one is the Pulsar Theory. Imagine a huge star in space much bigger than our Sun. Sometimes these big stars finish their life journeys in a spectacular event called a supernova. When this happens, the star's core collapses, becoming super compact, as if you're squeezing all the stuff from that star into a tiny space. That tiny, super-dense core is called a neutron star. Some of these neutron stars are extra special. We call them pulsars. They get their name because they seem to pulse with energy, like a space lighthouse. These pulsars have incredibly strong magnetic fields, much stronger than what you'd find on Earth. They're like enormous magnets in space. Because of this, they shoot out beams of energy. They're also spinning super fast, so these beams of energy seem to pulse on and off as they spin around. Now, the strange signal we detected seems to have similarities with pulsars, but not quite. Pulsars usually have a predictable lifespan and slow down over time, eventually stopping their radio signals. In contrast, our mysterious signal is quite persistent and is blinking beyond what's expected for pulsars. So, maybe it's not a typical pulsar, or not a pulsar at all. There's also a magnetar theory. Now, a magnetar is another type of neutron star. They're like supercharged versions of pulsars, with even stronger magnetic fields and slightly longer pulsating periods. Maybe this is what causes our signal's intense persistence. However, when we plotted the data, we also realized the signal didn't match the magnetar's vibes either. Magnetars not only send out radio waves, but also powerful X-rays because they're so energetic. But the signal we received was only sending out radio waves. So we figured it's not a pulsar and not a magnetar. The signal's behavior is very strange and suggests an unnatural source. This means there might be something in the universe that scientists haven't fully explored yet. And there is a space object that we don't know much about. The final theory is the so-called dwarf pulsar. Sounds a little dopey to me. Couldn't help myself. Now, a dwarf pulsar is like a star that blinks with light flashes, similar to pulsars, but it takes longer for each blink. Usually, white dwarfs are the leftovers from smaller stars. They don't blink because their magnetic field isn't as strong as pulsars. But when a white dwarf becomes pretty hefty, almost the mass of our Sun, it gets super dense and starts pulsating with a strong magnetic field, just like pulsars. They have a cool quirk. White dwarfs are made of electrons, not neutrons like pulsars. When these charged electrons start dancing with a magnetic field, they shoot out periodic light flashes, which happen every 100 to 1,000 seconds. As you remember, our signal has a period of 22 minutes, 1,320 seconds. A bit longer than the usual white dwarf pulsars, but it's much closer to the truth. So far, this sounds like the most plausible explanation. But even this theory isn't fully confirmed yet. This just shows how much there is in the universe that we're still figuring out. For example, fast radio bursts, another mysterious type of signal we've been detecting. They're like quick, intense bursts of energy in the form of radio waves. They have a ton of energy. FRBs are so powerful that sometimes they can be brighter than entire galaxies. Now, imagine this. They release as much energy in a few milliseconds as our Sun does in 3 whole days. Wow! These bursts happen all over the sky with huge frequencies, although some have been detected with lower frequencies. Every day, we catch around 10,000 random FRBs in the sky. Some of them repeat, but most happen once and disappear forever. Unfortunately, most of them only last for a fraction of a second, and by the time their energy reaches us, it's 1,000 times weaker than a mobile phone signal from the moon. This is why, despite their brightness, there's still a lot we don't understand about them. We're still trying to figure out what causes these FRBs. They could be coming from different sources, like already mentioned magnetars, colliding stars, or even merging galaxies or white dwarfs. As these bursts travel through space, they pick up information about the cosmic environments they pass through, like interstellar gas clouds. It's very unlikely that FRBs are some messages from extraterrestrial beings, though. Not only because there are thousands of them every day all across the sky, but also because we know that the sources of these bursts must be incredibly energetic themselves. Our neighbors would have to have equipment stronger than entire galaxies for that. But the bottom line is, while all these signals are fascinating, there's still a ton to learn about them.
Weird, unusual sounds out of nowhere are spreading all over our galaxy, constantly repeating, and it's something we've never heard before. Scientists discovered it in 2020, and it was nothing like any of the other energy signatures they ever studied. Powerful and bright radio signals occurring from time to time, mysteriously disappearing within a day. It doesn't fit the profile of any space body we know. The signal is a bit irritating, and it disappears without a schedule. When scientists tried to match the signal with some other telescopes, it was gone. Low-mass stars sometimes flare up with radio energy, but not here, since they mostly have X-ray counterparts. Very dense collapsed stars, like pulsars and magnetars, are also not a choice. The closest solution they got is a mysterious class of objects we know as the Galactic Center Radio Source, GCRT. It's a radio source that brightens and rapidly glows. It decays near the center of our galaxy and could help us unravel the mysteries of the universe. If you had a flying car that could go up at a speed of 60 miles per hour, you'd only need 1 hour to get into space. The moon is a little bit farther, 250,000 miles, which is about 10 times the circumference of our planet. That means a moon trip would be like taking a tour around the globe and doing it 10 times straight, which would take less than 6 months. A trip to Pluto would take over 800 years. Proxima b is the closest Earth-like neighbor we have. It's a small rocky world that orbits the closest stellar neighbor of our Sun. It orbits the star's habitable zone, an area that's far enough from any star to have moderate conditions, not too cold and not too hot for liquid water to at least hypothetically exist. If you tried to travel to Proxima b at a speed of 25,000 miles per hour, which is the speed of the Apollo moon rockets, it would take you over 112,000 years to get there. You might not be able to breathe there. No one knows if Proxima b has an atmosphere. Humans explore the universe all the time, but we can only see around 5% of the matter up there. And Albert Einstein was the first one that realized the empty space is not really nothing. The rest we can't see is actually made up of invisible matter, also known as dark matter. It's about 27%, combined with something called dark energy, which is 68%. If you try to pour water into space, of course, outside of a spacecraft, it would immediately boil away or vaporize. That's because there's no air or air pressure in space. As air pressure lowers, the temperature you'd usually need to boil water at also gets lower. Keeping that in mind, water boils way faster on a mountaintop than, for example, at sea level. There's no air pressure in space, so water could boil at a very low temperature. Scientists believe that there are at least a couple of billion galaxies out there. We don't know the real number, and probably never will, but they tried to calculate it by counting how many galaxies we can see in a pretty small and restricted area of the sky. It may seem as if the universe was filled with stars and a couple of planets here and there, but our home galaxy has at least 100 billion planets. If you fill a balloon with helium and release it, you'll notice it floats very high. It'll go up into the atmosphere, but it won't go into outer space. The higher you go, the thinner the air in our atmosphere gets. Your balloon will rise up until the point where the atmosphere surrounding it has the same weight as the helium inside it. That will happen at approximately a height of 20 miles above the surface, so this is as far as a helium balloon can rise. We don't really know how big the universe is. We can't see its edges, nor do we know if it even has an edge. We use technology to see out to a distance of around 14 billion light-years from our planet. This means we can see around 28 billion light-years in diameter across, starting with the outermost layer of our atmosphere that ends at around 600 miles above our planet's surface. Although the size of the universe is constantly changing and gets bigger through time. Mercury is closest to the Sun, so most people think it's the hottest planet too. Still, Venus is the hottest planet. It's the second planet away from our central star, around 30 million miles farther from the Sun compared to Mercury. Mercury doesn't have an atmosphere, which is like some sort of a warming blanket that helps maintain the heat coming from the Sun. Venus has an unexpectedly thick atmosphere, around 100 times thicker than the one we have. Its atmosphere doesn't let the heat out, it just keeps it, and constantly makes Venus hotter and hotter. Also, it mostly consists of carbon dioxide that freely lets solar energy in. But it's less transparent to lose long wavelength radiations that the warm, heated surface emits. The average temperature there is around 875 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to melt tin. The maximum temperature on its neighbor, Mercury, is 800 degrees Fahrenheit. In maybe 2 or more billion years, it will be way too hot for life to exist on our precious planet. As the hundreds of millions of years go by, our sun will keep getting hotter and brighter. Eventually, temperatures will be so high, our beautiful oceans will be wiped away. Since they produce 70% of the oxygen we need to survive, there'll be no life without them. All of this means that our planet will simply become a vast desert, something like Mars is today. Pluto, a very distant used-to-be planet, now dwarf planet, is actually smaller in diameter than the entire US. The biggest distance there from Maine to Northern California is approximately 2,900 miles, while Pluto is only 1,473 miles across. Pluto is very far, but the edge of our solar system is 1,000 times farther away than this dwarf planet. But astronomers found many space objects orbiting our sun way farther than Pluto, such as Kuiper Belt objects and trans-Neptunian objects. There's also an Oort comet cloud that goes half a light year from Pluto, also 1,000 times farther. A neutron star is really heavy. Just a teaspoon filled with it would weigh 6 billion tons. Neutron stars are something that remain from huge stars that have run out of fuel. The fading star explodes, and its core falls apart, but due to gravity, it forms an extremely dense neutron star. These stars typically have a mass of up to 3 suns, but the radius there is around 6 miles, because this is one of the densest things in our universe, at least that we know about. The universe has a color, and it averages to be some kind of beige, or as they call it, cosmic latte. It also has its own smell that reminds you of seared steak or hot metal. At least, that's something astronauts floating in space have said. If you want to build a spacesuit, get ready to work really hard. It takes 5,000 hours to make it and will cost you $1 million. A really good one will have 11 layers of material and weighs about 110 pounds, and it needs to be comfortable. You'll need more space in there because you grow up to 2 inches when in space. When you're floating around in space, Earth's gravity doesn't have any impact on you. That's why the vertebrae in your spine might expand and relax a little bit, which means you'll be maybe 3% taller. For 6 feet, it's about 2 extra inches. Oh, don't worry, it's not permanent. As soon as you go down to Earth, you'll shrink back down to your normal size within a couple of months. Space isn't the best option if you want to have a conversation with your friend, because up there, sound doesn't travel at all. Molecules there are so far apart that sound vibrations can't reach them, which automatically means they can't vibrate, so we can't hear them. Movies are not accurate with this. No one could hear you screaming in space, too. We kind of live inside our sun. The sun is not just that big hot ball of light located 93 million miles away from us. Its outer atmosphere is way bigger. It extends far beyond the surface we can see. Our planet's orbit goes through its tenuous atmosphere. The evidence is when gusts of the solar wind generate the southern and northern lights. That means, in some way, we live inside the sun. Not just us, other planets too, including distant Neptune. The heliosphere, which is what we call the outer solar atmosphere, extends to about 10 billion miles.
Hey, wake up! Quick, listen to that. It's a 5-second FM signal coming from one of Jupiter's moons. You fumble for your phone and inform your colleagues. They freak out over the news and rush to the lab. You've been a scientist working with the Juno probe, exploring Jupiter for years. But this is the first time you've witnessed something so unusual. Ganymede is Jupiter's largest moon and the biggest moon in our solar system. If this space body didn't orbit around Jupiter, it would be classified as a planet. It's even bigger than Mercury and Pluto. What makes this moon stand out among others is the fact that it has its own magnetic field. The moon was born around 4.5 billion years ago. It means it's as old as Jupiter itself. This planet-sized space body takes 7 Earth days to orbit its planet. Everyone gathers at the laboratory, impatiently waiting for you to play the recording of the signal coming from space. Your colleagues get their game on, trying to figure out what the source of this mysterious sound is. Around 40% of Ganymede's surface is dark, with craters scattered around, and 60% is light-colored. There are formations that were probably caused by tectonic activity or the release of water from under the surface. Scientists managed to discover a thin layer of oxygen trapped in the moon's atmosphere. The temperatures there are super low, between -170 to -200 degrees Fahrenheit. There isn't much information about how the moon behaves or what chemical elements it hides inside. Some of your colleagues try to create the same conditions that existed when the sound was transmitted. For hours, they sit there waiting, but nothing. Maybe it was a fluke. You get to the control system and activate the Juno spacecraft. The main point of this mission is to observe Jupiter's gravity, magnetic fields, the atmosphere, and the planet's evolution. By the way, there's also some evidence that Jupiter's largest moon is evolving too. Since it has a magnetic field surrounding it, auroras pop up all the time. Those are glowing gas circling the moon's north and south poles. If life existed in such a place, it would probably be at the bottom of Ganymede's extremely salty ocean. For a long time, scientists thought that the sun was a crucial component to kickstart life. But now we know that there are organisms dwelling deep at the bottom of the oceans. Those are doing just fine without sunlight. The oceans of our planet are teeming with some of the most bizarre creatures of all shapes and sizes. Sea lilies live some 10,000 feet underwater. They got their name because they look like flowers, except they're not plants but animals. Don't be fooled by their stems and leaves. Those are body parts equipped with nerve endings to detect food around them. Goblin sharks are probably some of the most weird-looking sharks that live at the bottom of the ocean. They can grow up to 12 feet long and have a very unusual snout. Now, take a look at the anglerfish. It has a bioluminescent blob on its head to attract prey and navigate its way around the dark ocean floor. It's a natural flashlight that never needs new batteries. It's only the females that have these flashlights, though. The blobfish is another bizarre animal living down there. It lives in the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans, 9,000 feet under the surface. Anyway, even though you asked everyone to keep the news confidential, it somehow leaks to the media and becomes a new trending topic. You get a call from a news agency. They say they want to interview you about this breakthrough that may prove life exists in outer space. The next day, you head down to the news station to talk about your discovery. You have a whole live studio audience watching your every move as you reach out to grab your glass of water. The crew scurries around doing some last-minute checkups before you're live on air. The makeup artist does some final brush-ups. The sound engineer asks you to test your mic once more. Several of the producers are sitting in the front seats. Bright lights are flooding the studio. The countdown begins. 3, 2, 1, and you're introduced, and the host asks you to explain what it was that you heard. You tell them about the Juno space probe orbiting Jupiter. After a couple of questions, the host finally brings up the most dreaded one. Might the mysterious sound be coming from another civilization? Everyone leans in, waiting for you to answer. You freeze, not knowing what to say. Even though the crushing pressure at the bottom of the ocean is 1,000 times stronger than at sea level, life still exists there. Algae, which is considered a delicacy in the ocean world, is off-menu for deep-sea creatures due to a lack of sunlight. Many of these bottom dwellers have to munch on leftovers instead. Those sink down there from the upper layers of the ocean. The freezing temperatures and the intense pressure have altered the cells of these creatures. This has made them more resilient than the average fish. Bacteria were developing their own ways of surviving. Studies show that they feed on certain gases and chemicals, like sulfur and carbon dioxide. Methane and hydrogen are released when tectonic plates move against each other, and some of these bacteria feast upon those gases too. Tardigrades, also known as water bears, are microscopic critters that can live and thrive in extreme conditions. You can find them in volcanoes, frozen glaciers, and even in the empty void of space, which means that some life forms might actually exist on Ganymede. You explain this to your audience. Then you mention that you don't have enough information to determine if it was another civilization or a natural phenomenon that produced the sound. This doesn't mean that the bottom of Ganymede's freezing oceans isn't teeming with its own bizarre and weird creatures. There might be some legendary beasts like the Kraken or Leviathan there, or weird glowing fish with 2 heads, a fish with tentacles and a large fin, giant crabs. The bacteria there might be as varied as our own. The plants, if they exist there, have to be strong enough to survive the sub-zero temperatures. The animals on Jupiter's largest moon could be as big as our blue whales or as tiny as plankton. After the interview, you head back to the lab to examine the records once more. On your way home, you see posters of yourself with captions like, "Are we not alone?" Hey, you've become a celebrity. Many people take pictures of you. You've been booked by other agencies for more interviews. Some science magazines even want to put you on the front cover as the Person of the Year. Every time you come to work, you wait for the sound to appear again, but nothing. You send a signal from the Juno probe, trying to make some sort of contact with whatever produced the sound. Nothing. That night, you pass out on your desk once more. Eureka moment wakes you up in the middle of the night. There might be something you've missed. You run the numbers again and realize that the answer was in front of you this whole time. It wasn't another civilization that produced this sound. The source was electrons. Every planet produces its own sound. It's created when charged particles from the solar wind and the planet's magnetosphere interact with one another. That's what happened on Ganymede. The electrons in its magnetic field, where the probe picked up the signal, were acting stranger than usual, and this amplified some irregular frequencies. You're embarrassed and spend the rest of your night making phone calls, telling your team the news. The agency that interviewed you releases a statement. They explain that other civilizations aren't trying to contact us. You sit back at your desk, waiting for the next big thing to happen. Europa is another of Jupiter's moons that may host life. It's made up of an iron core, a mantle, and a salty ocean, twice the volume of all the oceans on Earth. And just like Ganymede, the ocean lies under a water ice crust. Scientists claim that there might even be active volcanoes there, and some resilient bacteria may live there. With enough water, certain chemicals, and a source of energy, Europa could produce life. But it's unlikely that we'll find anything but tiny microbes.
The dark days are mysterious natural phenomena that have occurred only a few times in the history of humankind. We can write them off as eclipses or just some weather events, but in reality, they're very creepy and we have no idea why they happen. So, what are these dark days anyway? What's so strange about them? Let's try to find out. The sun is off. What are we gonna do? That's what the residents of Yamal, Siberia asked meteorologists on September 18, 1938. In the morning, instead of going to work, they all gathered at the weather station. They were waiting for answers. All because on that day, they observed something inexplicable, an eclipse which they later nicknamed the Black Day. And neither astronomers nor meteorologists can explain what happened back then. Here's how one of them described this event. At 8:30 a.m., we noted a decrease in light. At the same time, the color of the clouds began to acquire a yellowish-brown, sometimes red-brown hue. By 9 a.m., the lighting had changed dramatically. It was as if you were looking at the world through a dark light filter. The brown tones of the clouds intensified. By 10:30 a.m., the sky and Earth didn't differ from each other in lighting and color. Everything seemed homogeneous, black, absolutely devoid of light. Pretty creepy, right? And that's not all. The city was also plunged into complete radio silence. Meteorologists couldn't even contact the authorities, and local residents were unable to set up any stations. Everyone was in the dark, both literally and figuratively. Meteorologists decided to try and launch several flares. The flares soared into the air towards the heavy dark clouds hanging over the city and disappeared. The clouds were so dense that the flares were completely invisible. At the same time, the weather was perfectly fine. Everything was quiet. And this black silence lasted for about an hour. After that, the Black Day ended as unexpectedly as it began. Even more baffling, those strange clouds left literally no trace. No rain, no dust, nothing. After that event, researchers found out that the Black Day had spread for 125 to 155 miles around. They also learned that the dark band was moving from west to east. After passing through the southern part of the Yamal Peninsula, it headed on for a while and then disappeared completely. Yamal isn't the only place where this phenomenon occurred. In fact, similar eclipses have been happening in different parts of Earth for many years. For example, in New England, on May 19, 1780, people there witnessed an event that was later called New England's Dark Day, but it lasted not one day, but several. A few days before this event, the sky turned yellow, and on May 19th, in broad daylight, it suddenly turned black. Here's what one of the witnesses, Joseph Plum Martin, later told the press. It was very dark. People had to light candles in their houses to carry on with their usual business. The night was as uncommonly dark as the day was. The smell of soot reigned in the air. Nearby rivers were covered with a thin layer of ash. When the real night came, people noticed through the clouds that the moon had turned dark red. Only a couple of days later, people were finally able to see stars through the veil of clouds. And then everything suddenly returned to normal. No one had any idea what had happened. 22 years later, on June 2, 1802, a schooner named El Dorado sailed across the Pacific Ocean. Suddenly, they were overtaken by complete darkness. There was no storm, and the ocean was completely calm, but the whole sky was covered with black clouds. These clouds dissipated after half an hour and left no trace. And again, 74 years later, one of the dark waves happened in Wisconsin on March 19, 1886. It was 3 p.m., and this time, the wave was very short. It lasted only 5 to 10 minutes. A sudden night fell on the city. Frightened horses were neighing, and terrified people were running around, trying to find a place to hide. When everything calmed down, local newspapers reported that the wave passed from west to east. There was no solar eclipse, no winds or hurricanes, nothing that could cause the darkness over the city. And finally, once again, it happened on December 2nd, 1904, in Memphis. Or rather, that's what rumors claim, since there's no scientific evidence of this event. It was clear and cold dawn over Bluff City. People were doing their usual Friday morning chores. Then, around 9 in the morning, without any warning, the sun suddenly disappeared from the sky. It took only a minute for the bright sunny day to turn into pitch darkness. People interrupted their work, and children in schools were completely terrified. And just like in previous cases, the weather was perfectly calm. It lasted for about half an hour and then suddenly ended. A little later, following a mysterious eclipse, a ferocious storm hit the city. So, what's going on? All these strange cases can surely be explained scientifically, right? Well, actually, scientists don't have a definite answer. All these events are very similar, but we don't have a single explanation that could cover them all. Let's take a look at some theories. The first thought that comes to mind, it's probably a partial or total eclipse. But no, this is not the case. There were no eclipses on those days, and even if we consider this theory, before any eclipse, the sky darkens gradually. Eclipses themselves only last a couple of minutes, certainly not a few hours or even days. Also, unlike eclipses, these events were local to specific cities. Well, maybe it's some other astronomical event. Some scientists believe that during the event on Yamal, a band of cosmic dust touched Earth, but later they found out that no astronomical bodies approached the planet that day. Alright, any other ideas? Forest fires could be the reason. When a large area of forest is burning at the same time, a column of air can rise to great heights, like 3 to 4 miles. These airflows carry ash and other burnt stuff to different places, and since all these things are so high in the sky, they simply freeze there and turn into something resembling black clouds. That was probably the case for New England. At that time, a wave of forest fires broke out in Canada. They could easily spread through the north of the US. Also, just look at this description. Yellowed sky, the smell of soot, ash on the water. Everything sounds logical, but this theory of fires only works for the event in New England. What about the other cases? Where would you find a forest fire in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, for example? Alright, moving on. Scientists tried to explain the story from Memphis by saying it could be a hurricane, but the black cloud swept through the city before the storm, not during or after it. And it wasn't some kind of typical storm cloud, it was full-fledged night darkness. So what's really going on? Now, meteorologists call this phenomenon a local decrease in the transparency of the atmosphere. Unlike solar eclipses, this darkness is denser. It also covers only a small area. The transparency of the atmosphere is its ability to let through radiation and light. It's basically, how well can I see distant objects? Everything can get dark and blurry, for example, because of the dust in the air, volcanic eruptions, fogs, and so on. So, according to this theory, dark days are just an extreme drop in the transparency of the atmosphere. But it's still strange. If that's the case, shouldn't everything have been covered with thick fog or something like that? Yeah, it was very dark, but when people lit the lamps, the visibility was pretty good. Nothing blocked the view except the black clouds that covered the sun. In other words, this phenomenon is very hard to explain. As far as we know, it happened only 5 to 6 times in the history of humankind. If there were other cases, they weren't documented. This phenomenon is impossible to predict, and no one knows how it worked, as well as where and when it will happen next time. And although there are many hypotheses, none of them can be verified. Maybe if these events happen again in the future, we'll be able to study them better. But unfortunately, at the moment, the dark days remain a mystery. Do you have any theories or ideas on this stuff? If so, write them down in the comments.
If the multiverse theory is correct, ours is not the only one out there. Which is as interesting as it is scary, right? Now, not every scientist is on board with this mind-bending concept. And let's be honest, the idea of actually making contact with these parallel universes sounds about as probable as winning the lottery while riding a unicycle. But hold on tight, because this strange concept isn't just limited to the realms of fiction anymore. Believe it or not, a bunch of scientific theories actually support the existence of parallel universes. And let me tell you, it's a topic that stirs up quite the debate in scientific groups. Now picture this. The universe we live in is mind-numbingly vast. We're talking billions, some say even trillions of galaxies swirling around, each packed with an almost uncountable number of stars. Some brainiacs studying the universe's shape suggest that its diameter could span a staggering 7 billion light-years. Others even argue that it might be infinite. Could there be more out there than meets the eye? Well, real scientific theories are exploring the possibility of universes existing alongside, beyond, or even mirroring our own. These intriguing concepts of multiverses and parallel worlds often intertwine with other, more familiar scientific ideas like the Big Bang, string theory, and quantum mechanics. In order for us to figure out what's out there, we have to rely on the information we're a bit more confident in, right? Let's rewind the cosmic clock about 13.7 billion years ago. Everything we're able to see today was squished into a minuscule singularity. Then, if the Big Bang theory is to be trusted, it all went boom. The universe inflated with a speed faster than that of light everywhere, within less than a second. The way the universe went pop has led some clever researchers to ponder the existence of more than one universe. They question whether that sudden growth ended everywhere at the same time. While the expansion ceased for everything we're able to see from Earth 13.8 billion years ago, cosmic inflation might still be ongoing in some other mysterious corners. Some theoretical physicists say that as inflation ends in one place, a new balloon universe forms. But here's the catch, you can't just hop from one bubble to another like intergalactic tourists. These bubble universes are expanding indefinitely, and their edges are zooming away from us faster than light can travel. And here's where things get even more confusing. Let's say we somehow manage to reach the edge of our local balloon and encounter the next universe. Well, those same theoretical physicists mentioned that the neighboring universe could be a whole different ballgame. It might have completely different laws of physics, making it a bizarre place for us. Following the same idea, some say that in this vast multiverse of bubble universes, there might be other life forms just like us. The problem is, we're getting farther away from them with each passing moment, and our paths will never cross. Other super smart researchers out there are trying to connect parallel universes with quantum mechanics. Now, quantum mechanics is basically the fancy math behind teeny tiny particles. According to it, these particles can exist in multiple states all at once. They call it a wave function that holds all the crazy options. But here's the catch. When we observe these particles, we only see one outcome. It's like the universe keeps playing hide and seek with us. Now, there's this theory called the many worlds theory that says whenever we observe one outcome, another universe pops up where a different outcome becomes real. It's like our universe acts as a giant tree, constantly branching into countless versions of itself. These alternate universes can't mingle, though, so you wouldn't even know if there are a bunch of other yous living slightly or totally different lives. This many worlds theory is pretty bold and a bit hard to prove or disprove. And that's not great for science because scientists love to test and experiment with their ideas. But if there's infinite space out there, why wouldn't there be infinite universes too? Try to imagine the universe as this giant cosmic playground. Some specialists believe that if it's indeed never-ending, then there's only a limited number of ways that its building blocks can arrange themselves. Eventually, they have to repeat certain patterns. If this is true, then it may be possible that somewhere out there might be another version of you living the exact same life, even down to what you had for brunch yesterday. Did we ever have any proof of these supposed parallel universes? Well, some say we did. Have you heard the tale of the mysterious man from Taured? It's the story of a man that ended up at a Japanese airport saying he was from a totally unknown country called Taured. Now, some folks think it's proof of time travel, while others believe it's evidence he came from a different universe altogether. As much as you'd like to believe the story to be factual, the tricky part is this Taured place. There's a reason you haven't heard of it. There's no Taured to be found, whether in the present day or back in the 1950s when this supposed incident happened. After the airport incident, the man just vanished into thin air a day after arriving in Japan. Poof, gone forever. Let's rewind to that fateful day in July 1954 when the man from Taured supposedly landed in Tokyo. Descriptions paint him as a bearded, French-speaking man. Nothing too outlandish so far, right? Depending on who's telling the story, things start to diverge a bit. In one version, when the man hands over his passport to get stamped, the Japanese officer's eyes bulge out. While the passport looked legit, the country listed as Taured isn't recognized by anyone, including the officer and other officials. Naturally, they take our Taured visitor away for a little Q&A session. In another version, the man straight up tells the officer he's from Taured and shows him the passport when he doesn't buy it. Our man from Taured then started trying to convince the officers that his homeland is the real deal. According to him, Taured sat snugly between France and Spain and would have been around for about 1,000 years. To prove his point, he even points to the area on a map that matches the Principality of Andorra. Obviously, things took a mysterious turn. The officers decided to hold the man in custody, suspecting he might be up to no good. They put him up in a nearby hotel for the night, but not without stationing 2 people outside his room to keep an eye on things. Can you guess what happens next? Drumroll, please. When the officers showed up the next morning, ready to continue their investigation, the man had vanished without a trace. No sign of escape, and to make matters even more puzzling, all his personal documents have magically vanished too. What if the man from Taured was a time traveler or an intergalactic adventurer? Some have even delved into the realms of science fiction to explain this bizarre event, and you won't believe the number of people on the internet who've latched onto it as evidence for alternate realities. One of the weirdest ideas suggests that the man accidentally stumbled into a parallel dimension and ended up at the Japanese airport. In that parallel universe, there's an Earth just like ours, but instead of Andorra, they call it Taured over there. Another idea floating around was that the man was a time traveler from the future. Sorry to break it to you, but the most reasonable explanation for the whole story of the man from Taured is that someone's imagination went wild. Since there are many versions of the same story, it's probable people just kept adding outrageous details to the case, to make it more sensational. The whole story simply snowballed into an urban legend, and there's little to no reason to believe we've once seen a time traveler or intergalactic hitchhiker right here on Earth. It's been more than a year since the James Webb Telescope, which had taken over 20 years to complete, was launched. And for such a relatively short time, the ultra-modern and most powerful in history piece of equipment, has already made plenty of discoveries. By observing the universe at infrared wavelength, James Webb lets us see things no other telescope has ever shown before. The primary goal of this incredible piece of equipment is to study the formation of galaxies and stars that appeared in the early universe. For example, look at the closest to us stellar nursery, a region of space where new stars get born. NASA has shared an image from James Webb that shows a small star-forming region. If you look at the picture attentively, you'll see jets bursting from infant stars. Around them, different colored clouds of cosmic dust are colliding with one another. The view is mesmerizing. The red dust consists of molecular hydrogen. You can also notice that some stars have something like shadows. Those hint at the creation of what will later become planets. At first sight, the image may seem chaotic, but astronomers claim that it's a relatively small and quiet stellar nursery in comparison to some others. Many young stars there are similar in size to our Sun, or a bit smaller. The photo itself was taken with the help of Webb's near-infrared camera, NIRCam. It's the observatory's primary camera that snaps images of the cosmos in 2 different infrared ranges. Another amazing discovery the Webb telescope has made is smoke molecules in a distant galaxy. It's the first time such molecules have been discovered so far away from our planet. The galaxy in question lies 12.3 billion light-years away from Earth. It most likely formed about 1.5 billion years after the Big Bang. Despite such a huge distance between the galaxy and our planet, scientists have managed to detect chemical compounds found in soot or smoke, and it's quite a big deal since it has pushed the record for detecting similar complex molecules back by around 1 billion years. This study has also confirmed the sheer power of the coolest piece of space equipment of all time. It managed to make this discovery despite the fact that the spectrometer needed for the measurements didn't perform to the fullest after having experienced a sudden and surprising degradation. The James Webb Telescope has also helped to boost our understanding of exoplanets. Those are planets orbiting stars other than our own Sun. At the beginning of 2023, the observatory spotted its first exoplanet, LHS 475b. It's located 41 light-years away from Earth and is approximately the same size as our planet. According to NASA, nowadays, James Webb is the only operating telescope capable of categorizing the atmosphere of Earth-sized exoplanets. The research team behind the discovery believes such results underline the precision of the telescope. They hope that it will help us locate many more rocky exoplanets that we might be able to colonize in the future. Even though, at first sight, it may seem that the universe is pretty empty, it's actually a very busy place. And Webb has all the necessary instruments to see all kinds of cosmic events happening out there. Just look at this image of WR-124. It's a star on the cusp of its explosive demise. In the image, the star is about to go supernova. It happens when a star runs out of its fuel and explodes at the end of its life cycle, releasing a giant cloud of space dust and hot gas into space. The star captured by the Webb telescope was at the Wolf-Rayet stage of its life. That's a period when a star is shedding its outer layers before going supernova. The next amazing thing discovered by James Webb is a star-planet hybrid with very strange clouds. This bizarre world, VHS 1256b, is actually a brown dwarf. Those are bigger than planets but too small to classify as stars. They emit some light of their own and are quite hot, but their mass is simply not enough to fuse hydrogen into helium like full-fledged stars do. Space bodies of this kind aren't actually brown. They occur in a wide variety of colors, but those are mostly invisible to the human eye. What we can see is the light they emit, and to us, it appears to be dark orange or magenta. The brown dwarf discovered by the Webb telescope is almost 20 times the size of Jupiter. It orbits 2 red dwarf stars, and to complete one orbit, it needs over 10,000 years. Astronomers first found out about this unusual exoplanet in 2016. But at that time, they didn't classify it as a brown dwarf, and, thus, couldn't explain its puzzling reddish glow. Now, thanks to the James Webb telescope, they know the space object's origin. Anyway, back to those clouds. As you know, clouds on Earth are made of water vapor. But those on the brown dwarf are different. They seem to be made of sand. It looks like good old sand from Earth, but it's actually not. The clouds are made of tiny particles of silicate. Another recent discovery involves several large galaxies that scientists believe were born not long after the Big Bang. They aren't supposed to be there, and no one expected to find them. But the James Webb Space Telescope has spotted them. These galaxies, as massive as our home Milky Way, are full of mature red stars. Astronomers have analyzed the light coming from them and estimated their age 500 to 700 million years after the Big Bang. It means that they came into being when our universe was very young, almost a baby. But the most bizarre thing about these galaxies is their tremendous size and the age of the stars dwelling there. The data received by the telescope don't coincide with the existing ideas about what the universe looked like and how it evolved in its early years. It also doesn't match the earlier observations made by Hubble. And here, James Webb has captured a distant region of space in unprecedented detail. This section of space is known as Pandora's cluster. In the image, you can see 3 massive clusters of galaxies coming together and forming a megacluster. The combined mass of these clusters acts as a powerful gravitational lens. And thanks to this natural magnification effect, scientists can see other galaxies in the region. Astronomers claim that the most recent image of Pandora's cluster is stronger and deeper than they have ever seen. James Webb has also managed to spot thousands of young stars never seen before in the Tarantula Nebula. This space formation got its nickname because of the appearance of dusty filaments spotted in previous images. It's the biggest star-forming region in the local group, which includes the galaxies nearest to the Milky Way. The Webb telescope's images have helped to shed light on the composition of the Tarantula Nebula. The telescope has also detected protostars, infant stars in the process of gaining mass. Astronomers expect that these protostars will eventually form and shape the nebula further. Among other discoveries made by the James Webb Telescope, you can see the birth of 50 distant stars. Some of them power protoplanetary disks, which might later form solar systems light years away from our own. Here's one more image from James Webb. You can see a supermassive black hole that has a mass of 9 billion suns. It's so ginormous and ancient that scientists are struggling to explain its existence. Astronomers have also discovered a distant ring of dust, rock, and gas that contains a chemical called methylcation. It's known as a molecular building block of life, and it makes most of the organic material on our planet. James Webb helped researchers see powerful sandstorms on a planet 235 trillion miles away. Astronomers were happy to discover this treasure chest of countless tiny sand particles. Now look at this. Do you recognize this image? Those are the so-called pillars of creation. But this new view shows us just how star-speckled that dusty region actually is. You can compare the new photo with the one taken by Hubble in 2014. This is astonishing proof of scientific progress.
Hey, it's possible that Jurassic World is not just a fantasy. Dinosaurs could really be walking, swimming, or flying around somewhere out there, but not on Earth. Some scientists think there may be planets far, far away from our solar system where slightly different versions of T-Rex and other dinosaurs live. They got the idea based on the fact that our planet used to have about 30% higher oxygen levels than today. That's why complex and intelligent life forms like dinosaurs could develop in the first place. They also want to explore basic building blocks that are the reason why we have life on Earth. These building blocks are something we know as amino acids. They make proteins, sugars, and genetic material, RNA and DNA. They're consistent and mainly exist in one shape or orientation. There are 2 ways they can be oriented, right and left. That means they mirror each other, just like our hands. It's something we call chirality. For life to exist, proteins must have one form, which means they can be oriented right or left. On our home planet, almost all living things, from the smallest bugs to whales and elephants, have amino acids with a left-handed orientation. We're not exactly sure why things are set that way, but there's a theory that's because of meteorites that crash-landed on Earth 4 billion years ago. They brought specific kinds of amino acids and some other organic materials to our planet and somehow set the pattern we have today. Maybe we could use special telescopes we created to search planets, especially those where conditions are similar to how they used to be on Earth back in time when dinosaurs existed. In that case, it would be better to watch them from a safe distance, because considering what they might look like, researchers say it might be a safer choice. That's a cool idea, but it's still very tricky. The history of life on our planet, especially that of dinosaurs, involved many catastrophic events and mass extinctions. There's always more room for new theories about dinosaurs. One of them says oil comes from dinosaurs. Interesting, but not true. Oil formed from the remains of sea animals and plants from millions of years ago. This was way before dinosaurs appeared. Tiny organisms ended up at the bottom of the sea. As bacteria decomposed animals and plants, they removed most of the oxygen and some other elements from them. It left behind only a sludge, which was mostly made of hydrogen and carbon. As time passed, those remains became covered with many layers of silt and sand. When the depth of the sediment increased to 10,000 feet or even more, heat and pressure turned the remains into natural gas and crude oil. It's possible that dinosaurs lived or fell in the sea and later became petroleum in the same manner. But no one has ever found crude oil containing their skeletons. So this is just an unproven theory. Then there's the feathered dinosaur theory, which, unlike the previous one, seems to have more foothold in reality. Back in 2010, researchers found evidence that 100 million years ago, there had been a dino species with ginger feathers. Another group of scientists claimed there had been a different species from 150 million years ago. Those dinos had freckles and reddish-brown feathers on the tops of their heads. The color patterns probably had their purpose. Maybe it was a way to communicate with other representatives of their species or to attract mates. But years later, scientists studied the Microraptor, also called a feathered dinosaur. They realized it had probably been more like a bird than a dinosaur. The key point is how birds replace their feathers. Birds that fly have to replace their feathers in a specific order, otherwise they won't be able to fly very well. And the Microraptor's fossils showed that this creature had changed its feathers in a similar pattern. So they're not really sure which category this animal falls into. Dinosaurs that had feathers shed a lot of their skin piece by piece, like dandruff. Hey Bob, looking a little flaky there. Need a new shampoo? Yeah, they didn't shed their skins like lizards do, as if they take off an old suit. When we talk about dinosaurs, we usually don't picture them as social creatures, more like isolated ones similar to lizards. But some researchers discovered an 80-million-year-old collection of clutches in the Gobi Desert. It means there were colonies of dinosaurs that protected their nests and guarded their young, similar to birds. Crocodiles are known for doing that too. Pterosaurs were flying dinosaurs, and pelycosaurs were fin-backed ones. Some studies have shown that these two species used their exaggerated head crests and sails or fins to get to their potential partners. There are many theories about their crests and what they were needed for, though. Some experts believe that was how dinosaurs regulated their temperature. Others think they needed a crest to steer through the air. It's hard to say anything for sure since their fossils are rare and they don't have living descendants. But the most likely option is that the crest had the same purpose as a peacock's tail and was used for selecting mates. The bigger the crest, the more chances a pterosaur had to get a partner. You know theropods, those scary meat-eating predators that are shown in most dinosaur movies? Well, they might have enjoyed eating plants way more than tearing flesh. Not all of them, but it's possible that many of them weren't as fierce as we might think. Those big scary ones, like T-Rex, could be exceptions rather than the rule. The thing is, movies show these creatures to be way faster than they probably were in reality. they could probably run just a little bit more quickly than the average human runner. Scientists study the diet of coelurosaurs. Those seem to be the closest relative to birds. It was hard to figure it out because some of the dinos from this group had peg-like teeth, or in some cases, no teeth at all. To understand what they ate, researchers had to look for direct evidence and check if there was anything in their stomachs. And after they discovered certain things, including a beak with no teeth, they realized these fellas had followed a vegetarian diet most of the time. Even some famous ones, such as velociraptors, could be just innocent plant eaters and not terrifying beasts from Jurassic Park and our childhood nightmares. Over 10 years ago, scientists found fossils of a small dinosaur. It was a creature as big as a parrot with long legs. It came from a family with some of the most famous predators we know about, such as T-Rex and Velociraptor. Most dinosaurs that lived on land had 5 fingers, but later some of them ended up with fewer fingers. This new one they discovered was special because instead of having 3 fingers, which was more common for its family, it had just 1 finger with a sharp curved nail at the end of each front limb. This creature probably used this 1 finger to dig into insects' nests to feast. Even though we know all about the asteroid that wiped out dinosaurs, some have other theories. One paleontologist even had an idea that dinosaurs had possibly reached their end because they had been eating one another. This especially worked for ancestors of fierce, scary predators such as the Tyrannosaurus rex. It's possible they ate so many eggs of other dinosaurs that many species just went extinct. Once they started eating the eggs of very big dinos that we know as sauropods, it's possible they started getting bigger too. And no dinosaur mother could stop them from eating her eggs because she couldn't be around all the time. There were other big predatory animals that ate eggs, even early mammals. But in any case, later research showed dinosaurs couldn't have eaten enough eggs to have caused mass extinction. And that's all I have to say about that.
Earth's magnetic field hides a fascinating story. It turns out that it's getting weaker day by day. In fact, it's been doing so for the last 3,000 years. And if this trend continues, we could be in for some trouble within a millennium. What's the big deal? Well, picture this. Magnetic north becomes south, and vice versa. Pretty wild, right? When this happens, our planet's protective magnetic shield might weaken, allowing more cosmic rays to hit us. These high-energy particles from the universe can cause electronic malfunctions in our satellites and produce elements that could be harmful to us. The last time a polarity reversal occurred was between 772,000 and 774,000 years ago. Thankfully, humanity has some pretty smart people on the case who are investigating the history of Earth's magnetic field. They take cores of sediments from the seafloor and study the magnetization of fossils to figure out when these reversals occurred in the past and when they might happen again. Another group of researchers is studying the South Atlantic Anomaly, SAA, a vast region of Earth's magnetic field that is about 3 times weaker than the field at the poles. Using data from multiple satellites, they are trying to figure out what's causing the SAA and how it might change in the future. This could give us a glimpse into how a weakened magnetic field can affect our satellites and our planet. Sure, our generation won't be here to witness these changes, but it does make you wonder what that planet might look like upside down. Magnetically, that is. NASA's astronomers have also announced that in 4 billion years, the Milky Way galaxy is going to get a major glow-up. After a cosmic collision that will shake things up. I'm not talking about a small fender bender here. I'm talking about a titanic collision with our neighboring Andromeda galaxy. Humanity will have to hold on to its space helmet for this one, because the sun might get flung into a new region of the galaxy. However, our Earth and solar system probably won't be seriously affected. Sounds difficult to believe, so how come? NASA's Hubble Space Telescope did some hardcore measurements of Andromeda's motion. Although the galaxies will plow into each other, the stars inside each galaxy are so far apart that they won't collide with other stars during the encounter. However, the stars will be thrown into different orbits around their new galactic centers. According to simulations, our solar system will probably be tossed much farther from the galactic core than it is today. Set your telescopes aside. You don't need to start counting down the years. This event is likely scheduled in about 4 billion years, so chances for us to witness it are 0. Saturn is losing its rings. Thankfully, we won't be here to witness this sad event either. Apparently, the rings are being pulled into Saturn as a dusty rain of ice particles, all under the influence of Saturn's magnetic field. According to NASA's research, the ring rain is draining an amount of water products that could fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool from Saturn's rings every half an hour. The entire ring system will likely be gone in 300 million years. Scientists believe we should consider ourselves lucky to witness Saturn's ring system at all, as it seems to be in the middle of its lifetime. But if you think about it that way, that rings around planets are all temporary, there's a chance we've just missed out on the giant ring system of Jupiter, or those of Uranus and Neptune. These planets have only thin ringlets around them these days. Scientists have long debated whether Saturn was formed together with its rings or if the planet acquired them later in life. The new research favors the second scenario, indicating that they are unlikely to be older than 100 million years, while Saturn itself is around 4.5 billion years old. What caused the rings to appear in the first place? Well, there are a few theories. One of them suggests the rings could have formed when small, icy moons in orbit around Saturn collided. Perhaps their own orbits were messed up by a gravitational tug from a passing asteroid or comet. Who knows what humans might end up looking like in the future? It's unlikely we'll see any major changes in our lifetime. But let's take a journey to the future and ponder what we might evolve into. Will we become cyborgs with all sorts of cool machine implants? Or maybe we'll become a hybrid species of biological and artificial beings. To understand our future evolution, we gotta take a peek at our past. 1 million years ago, Homo sapiens didn't even exist. There were a few other similar species though, like the Neanderthal. Fast forward to today, and humans have become taller and sturdier. Maybe in the future we'll become smaller to conserve energy, as it's predicted that our planet will get more crowded. Speaking of crowded planets, living in these new conditions means we have to adapt, and fast. We're constantly interacting with lots of people, and remembering names is becoming a crucial skill. Luckily, technology might help us out with brain implants that will improve our memory. In the future, we might also have more noticeable technologies as part of our appearance. Imagine having an artificial eye with a camera that can read different frequencies of light. While predicting 1 million years into the future is pure speculation, we can use bioinformatics to make some predictions about the immediate future. Demographic trends suggest that urban areas will become more genetically diverse, while rural areas will become less diverse. And what about space? If we end up colonizing Mars, our bodies could change due to lower gravity. Maybe we'll have longer arms and legs, or even insulating body hair like our Neanderthal cousins. In the future, our moon is also going to witness some dramatic changes. We'll miss these ones too. In about 5 billion years, things are going to get really interesting in this corner of the universe. For now, the sun is chilling in its main sequence phase, just burning hydrogen like nobody's business. In the future, during the red giant phase, the sun is gonna puff up like a balloon until its atmosphere reaches out and engulfs our beloved Earth and Moon. Our natural satellite, which is already moving away from Earth, is gonna get warped around the sun's influence. its orbit will get all wonky and it'll end up closer to Earth during the new moon phase than during the full moon. And that's not even the worst part. If left alone, the moon would keep on moving away from Earth until it'll need almost 50 days to orbit us. As the sun continues with its own journey, its atmosphere will drag on the moon and cause its orbit to decay. Eventually, the moon will get torn apart into a stunning ring of debris circling Earth. We're talking about all its mountains, craters, and even the footprints and flags we left there, all scattered throughout the debris field. There's a chance the sun will shed enough mass to spare Earth and the moon from total annihilation. Or if we're really lucky, the sun will lose 20% of its mass and we'll be safe and sound. It's all just theory right now. We haven't seen a red giant star during this phase. The universe itself might go completely dark one day too. Scientists can't predict it with absolute certainty, but they can make some educated guesses. Right now, our universe is 13.77 billion years old, and it's still churning out new stars left and right. It's said that eventually, after about 1 trillion years, the last star will be born. That final star will be a little guy, a red dwarf, just a fraction the size of our sun. These stars are champs at living long lives, slowly sipping on hydrogen to keep their fusion reactions going. But even they can't last forever. Fast forward about 100 trillion years, and the last light will go out. The universe will be dark and lonely, but thankfully, we won't be here to watch it all fade away.
There are probably 36 other civilizations hanging out in the Milky Way, and over 170 billion galaxies, give or take, in the observable universe. Conditions for life are all over space. So, where is everybody? Nuclear physicist Enrico Fermi came up with this exact same question during a lunch break with his colleagues in 1950, leading to one of the most unsettling paradoxes in the universe. Even though there's a huge probability of extraterrestrial civilizations existing, we still haven't found any clear evidence of them. One possible explanation comes from the zoo hypothesis. It suggests that advanced extraterrestrial societies exist and know exactly who we are and where we are, but intentionally choose to stay hidden. They're just observing human quirky behaviors, as if we're in some kind of a cosmic wildlife park. But their intentions could be much darker. If you're a Star Trek fan, you probably remember the main rule for Federation members. Starfleet officers shouldn't contact species that are not advanced to avoid messing with their development, even if it means risking their own lives. Now, even though it's fiction, this rule perfectly captures what the zoo hypothesis is all about. Beings from other corners of the universe see our planet as a cosmic zoo with one-way bars. They can watch us brushing our teeth in the morning or walking our dog, but we can't catch a glimpse of them. In this theory, non-terrestrial life forms deliberately keep their distance from us, sticking to a hands-off policy agreement in the vast cosmic neighborhood. It's like those super smart beings agreed that we needed to have the freedom to shape our own future and destiny, following our own path of development without external contamination. The idea is that these super advanced civilizations could be like, 500 million years ahead of us, which would explain why we haven't seen any signs of them. And maybe it's better this way, as humans could eventually be destroyed or even assimilated by this new cosmic power, Independence Day style. As much as things like going to an art museum might be interesting to us, extraterrestrials probably wouldn't be too thrilled watching us stare at the Mona Lisa painting for hours. Interplanetary cultures might be more into buying tickets to quietly observe how we're developing new technologies, such as ultra-modern satellites. According to the zoo theory, they can't reach out to us until we hit a certain level of development. So improving our technology and wisdom could be the only way to show them that we're mature enough and don't need their spaceship parenting anymore. There are a couple of reasons why it's hard to buy into the zoo hypothesis. Okay, extraterrestrials might not visit or reach out because we're not all that advanced. But it is tough to explain why they keep ignoring all our attempts to communicate. Even if the zookeepers try their best not to interfere with animals' lives and behaviors. I bet they couldn't just ignore a bear speaking in loud and clear English about its desire to communicate. So that's pretty much why humans keep trying and trying to provoke some reaction from inhabitants of other planets using radio signals. In 2017, in a valley 8 miles southeast of the Norwegian city of Tromsø, a radar antenna transmitted some specially composed electronic music to potential intergalactic listeners. The target audience was in GJ273, also known as Lytton Star. It's a runty red dwarf located 12 light-years from our solar system. Since radio waves travel at the speed of light, we'll have to wait more than 2 decades before looking for a reply. But the main problem with radio waves is that we're kind of in the dark about where to look, and civilizations might be as far as 17,000 light-years away. Plus, we don't know which radio frequency extraterrestrials use to chat. Now here on Earth, we use the radio spectrum to send signals into the universe, assuming that what works for us might be a common method for other civilizations. But in fact, it could be considered a somewhat old-school technique for other beings. That's why current projects are now looking for technosignatures, which are signs of technological activity from extraterrestrials, like city lights, solar panels, megastructures, or artificial satellites. Another potential clue is to study the atmospheres of planets orbiting nearby stars, as an advanced civilization might be altering its atmosphere with different gases, making it detectable. Despite decades of observations, there is still no definitive evidence that advanced extraterrestrial civilizations are out there. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. Even by expanding search fields, we're talking about odds much slimmer than hitting the jackpot, with a roughly 1 in 3 billion chance of finding an advanced civilization within a given distance from Earth. Maybe space creatures are responding to our communication attempts, but in a way that we can't understand. The universe has been around for more than 13 billion years, while humans showed up just 200,000 years ago. And this is about 0.01% of the universe's age. It's like we're still learning to talk, while other super smart beings might be sending us messages that are all lost in translation. We keep waiting for a giant UFO to land on Earth and for green ETs with huge eyes to come out of it. But we forget that our intergalactic neighbors could be more interesting in building nanotechnologies to watch over us. They could also be trying to communicate using neutrinos, which are subatomic particles with an extremely small mass that could effortlessly pass through our planet without being detected by our current technological devices. Now, the zoo hypothesis has another issue. It is pretty tough to believe that, with all these civilizations supposedly hanging out in the universe, they would all decide not to reach out to humans. For this to happen, there would have to be a great sense of structure, with a higher intelligence working as the head of the universe, giving them direct orders and clear rules to keep us isolated. But we're talking about billions of possibilities for life, right? More civilizations mean that there are more chances of a violation of this no-contact rule. So, most likely, at least one independent planet would be just as desperate to find life in the universe as we are. Some scientists also believe that if such advanced life had substantially colonized Earth and many other planets, we would know it by now. The zoo hypothesis has 2 other variations that are even more frightening. In the laboratory hypothesis, nobody contacts us because humankind is actually being subjected to experiments, and Earth is essentially a giant science lab. Otherworldly creatures could be analyzing human responses to various survival challenges, such as tsunamis or massive earthquakes. In this case, the no-contact agreement between all other space groups would make a bit more sense, since it's in the name of scientific research for the greater good, at least for them. The planetarium hypothesis, proposed in 2001, suggests that we are living in an artificial universe, in some kind of virtual reality designed to give us the illusion that the universe is empty when it's not. But no possible generator could test this hypothesis. Besides the zoo, the laboratory, and the planetarium theories, there is another possible answer to the Fermi paradox. Nobody contacts us because humans are completely alone in the universe. This is known as the rare Earth hypothesis, and it emphasizes how Earth occupies an incredibly unique position. No other planet could bring life to the universe that could be more than just bacteria. We may consider ourselves pretty lucky, as even a small change in any of Earth's orbital parameters, like the distance from the Earth to the Sun or the rate of rotation, could make conditions too extreme for people or life in general. But again, it's hard to think that we are alone in this vast universe. So, we're back to the paradox. Where is everybody?
The Sun is getting ready to flip as its magnetic poles are reversing. Similar to Earth, the Sun has a magnetic north and a magnetic south. But unlike Earth, the reversing process of the Sun's poles is more frequent and easier to predict. The next flipping is expected to take place this year between April and August. As apocalyptic as it might sound, you don't have to worry. If you're around 30, you've already experienced this phenomenon more than once as the Sun flips every 11 years. You probably didn't notice any changes back then because this process doesn't impact Earth's life so much. But this time, things might be a little different. On Earth, ocean currents are movements that play a crucial role in influencing both climate and weather by distributing heat from the equator to the poles. On the Sun, these currents are more like an ocean of plasma, but they not only transport heat but also carry electromagnetic energy. That happens because the Sun is a huge ball of hot and ionized gases that keep flowing inside its core. By fusing together hydrogen atoms and forming helium, our star releases a massive amount of energy, leading to these very heavy flowing electric currents. And whenever you have currents, you have magnetic fields. It's easier to understand if you think of that classic experiment with a wire and a nail that you probably conducted in elementary school. When electricity flows through a wire, it creates a magnetic field around the wire. So when you connect a wire to a battery and wrap it around a nail, the nail becomes a magnet. This is similar to how electric currents create magnetic fields on the Sun. This whole process, with the help of which the Sun generates its magnetic field, is called a dynamo. We can't observe it directly, but we can see its effects on the Sun's surface. When plasma and magnetism flows become unstable and intense, they manifest as sunspots. You know, those dark areas on the Sun's surface? Much about how the dynamo works remains a mystery. But scientists have learned something important after observing these sunspots for centuries. The dynamo process follows a pattern. About every decade, it reorganizes itself. The Sun's polar magnetic fields get weakened, eventually reaching zero. And then they return, but with the opposite polarity. Back in the 50s, researchers figured out that when sunspots start to ramp up and become more intense, it means the poles are gearing up for a reversal. And over the past few years, solar activity has been off the charts. We're talking about more solar flares, more electromagnetic radiation bursts, and more plasma blobs being ejected into space. It's like we're sitting in the front row at the solar system's most epic fireworks display. In fact, the Sun hasn't been this lively in probably 2 decades. Right now, experts think the polar fields are almost in sync and steadily weakening, inching closer and closer to zero. But we haven't reached the point of reversal yet. Although it might sound like the Sun flips its magnetic poles like clockwork every 11 years, the truth is that it's not as neat as it seems. This path can be bumpy, and some aspects of the phenomenon are still very hard to predict. Take the last solar cycle, for example. The Northern Hemisphere started its magnetic flip back in early June 2012. But then it kinda hit a snag and lingered around the neutral point until late 2014. Meanwhile, in the southern hemisphere, things were smoother, with the polarity switching over in mid-2013. This time around, the sun is actually playing nice. Things seem to be running way smoother this cycle, with the poles transitioning more evenly. But here's the thing, reversal processes are never the same. That's what makes this phenomenon so interesting to observe. But at the same time, it's hard to predict how it'll affect us down here. Here on Earth, we don't have to worry too much about those intense sun explosions happening 93 million miles away. But if, and I emphasize if, a solar storm were to reach our planet, the main threat it would bring would probably be the disruption of communication satellites in space. However, things might be different in this cycle reversal happening in 2024 because the number of satellites has skyrocketed in recent years. For example, Elon Musk's Starlink system alone involves more than 4,000 of them. All these satellites, along with communication and GPS satellites, could be impacted or even destroyed by a powerful solar storm. Although the chances of a powerful solar storm hitting Earth are low, it's not impossible. Back in 1859, during the Carrington event, a storm occurred near the peak of the solar cycle, causing currents to surge through telegraph lines, sparking fires and disrupting messages worldwide. Earth fell silent as telegraph communications failed. Just imagine what a solar storm could do to our vast number of satellites today. It could affect everything we rely on daily, from space-based communication and navigation to weather forecasting services. The ground-level power distribution could also be affected. You can forget about watching YouTube or Brightside, because if such an event occurred today, it would cause an internet apocalypse, sending countless people and businesses offline. There's a prediction that says that if a Carrington-class event happened today, it would result in damages ranging from $0.6 to $2.6 trillion. And I'm talking about the United States alone. Fortunately for us, solar storms as intense as the Carrington event happen only once every 500 years or so. Bad news for communication satellites, but great news for aurora watchers. During the Carrington event, dazzling auroras borealis lit up the sky as polar light shows stretched far beyond their usual ranges. The northern lights were spotted as far south as Cuba and Honolulu, Hawaii, while the southern lights were seen as far north as Santiago, Chile. For many people around the world, this was their first glimpse of the aurora, leaving them obsessed with the unusually bright skies. Some of them thought it was the end of the world, while others began their day early, thinking the sun had risen after hearing birds chirping and seeing the bright skies. Today, we know there's nothing strange about it, considering that the appearance of auroras at lower altitudes is one of the expected effects of the sun's magnetic pole reversal. Typically, these dazzling phenomena are found between 60 and 75 degrees latitude, but during the last magnetic pole reversal in 2013, intense auroras were observed below 50 degrees. Eyewitnesses describe these auroras as blood or deep crimson red, shining so brightly that you could read a newspaper in their light. It's important to study this phenomenon and not to fear it. The inversion of the magnetic poles on the sun is actually a great opportunity for scientists to better understand how our star works. Since many pieces are still missing in the whole dynamo situation, we're still not very good at predicting why some solar cycles are more intense than others, or when exactly a coronal mass ejection will erupt. But being able to predict that is becoming more and more necessary as we venture ourselves into space. The more people are out there beyond Earth, the more exposed they are to these strong solar storms. That's why the scientific community wants to know more precisely when a solar storm can cause damage to spacecraft and space stations. Plus, it would help meteorologists make progress in predicting weather, not only on Earth, but also in space. The whole point is to make space travel safer as the interest in crewed missions to the Moon and Mars grows every year. Another reason why it's important to learn more about the sun's pole inversion is to better understand how the mysterious interior of the sun works. That could actually help us figure out the aspects of other stars in the universe and maybe get closer to answering the ultimate question: why are we here? Space, the final frontier. It's a vast and mysterious expanse that has fascinated us for centuries. But as much as we've learned about it, there are still plenty of things that we've been lied to about when it comes to space. Let's take a look at some of the biggest lies we've been told about this topic. First off, we have the idea that space is just this pristine, untouched wilderness. But that's not exactly true. We've been littering space with our debris for decades. Everything from old satellites to rocket parts. In fact, there are over 20,000 pieces of debris orbiting Earth right now, and they're causing all sorts of problems for future space missions. So if you're planning on visiting space anytime soon, watch where you go. You never know what kind of garbage might be floating around. Did you know that the sun is not actually yellow? It's green. Well, kind of. You see, scientists measure the temperature of a star by the color spectrum it emits. Cooler stars appear red, while the hottest of stars look blue. Our sun emits most of its energy at a wavelength that's close to green. But because it emits other wavelengths too, all these colors mix together, and your eyes see this vibrant mixture as white. From Earth, however, the sun looks yellow because our atmosphere is really good at scattering blue light. If our star was actually yellow, Earth would become a frozen rock, and we'd all be polar bears. Plus, the sun isn't on fire for real. It's a big ball of gas, mostly made of hydrogen and helium, and it works more like a gigantic nuclear reactor, constantly fusing hydrogen atoms to create helium inside its core. This process releases enormous amounts of energy. That's why the sun is so hot. Oh, and speaking of setting things on fire, explosions in space aren't real. Sorry, Star Wars fans, a spaceship can't go down in a violent blast because there is no air out there in space. No air means no oxygen, and no oxygen means no fire. Now, you might also think that there are too many stars in the night sky for you to count. But in fact, you can do that. According to the Yale Bright Star Catalog, there are 9,110 stars that you can see from Earth with the unaided eye. So, technically, you can count them, but I wouldn't be surprised if you lost count. And if you're worried about flying through an asteroid belt, don't be. Although it does have trillions of space rocks that range in size from space dust to a quarter of the size of the Moon, they're very spread out. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter is 140 million miles across, which is 1.5 times the distance between Earth and the Sun. This spreads space rocks thousands of miles apart, making it almost impossible for a spacecraft to collide with one. You'll instantly freeze in space without a suit. Nope, you won't turn into a popsicle right away. It's going to take a bit longer than that because heat and cold don't really move very quickly in the vacuum of space. But unfortunately for you, there's a bigger problem at hand. You won't be able to breathe. After just 15 seconds, your brain won't be getting enough oxygen from your blood, and you'll pass out. And then after just 2 minutes, it's curtains for the rest of your organs. So, in short, if you find yourself playing astronaut without a spacesuit, it's game over pretty quickly. Did you know that space doesn't have any temperature at all? That's because the temperature is defined by the speed at which particles move and the amount of energy they have. In the true vacuum of space, there are no particles to move around, making it temperatureless. Of course, some parts of space are really hot, like areas around stars. But the further away you get from stars, the more spread out particles are, making those areas of space pretty chilly. Number 9 is our planet's shape. No, it's not flat, but it's not a perfect sphere either. Yeah, it bulges at the equator because of our planet's wild spin. It's like Earth is doing its own little dance. And because of this bulging, launching spaceships from the equator is much easier than from the poles. Now, when it comes to sound in space, it's a bit of a tricky situation. You might think that no one can hear you scream, but that's not entirely accurate. The thing is, sound needs something to travel through, like air or water. In space, things are super spread out, so all those epic space battles and galactic explosions would be completely silent. Yet there are some places in space with enough particles for sound to travel through. For example, you can hear the black hole at the center of the Perseus galaxy cluster. Another myth is about zero gravity. That's not a thing. There's still some gravity hanging around the International Space Station, about 90% of what we feel on good old Earth. But astronauts get to float around because they're basically free-falling around the planet. And let's be real, Hollywood's version of space travel is not factual. Sure, orbits are a thing, but different altitudes mean different speeds. So moving from one orbit to another isn't exactly a walk in the park. You can't just push yourself in the right direction and hope for the best. You gotta take those orbital velocities into account. This reminded me of the 2013 movie Gravity and how Sandra Bullock tried to survive in space. Hollywood sure added some fuel to these myths. Yet again, who can blame them? Back in 1976, NASA's Viking 1 spacecraft snapped a photo of a curious rock formation on Mars that looked suspiciously like a face. Some folks out there claimed that it must have been proof of extraterrestrial life on the red planet, but NASA had a different take. According to the space agency, the face was nothing more than a bunch of rocks piled up in such a way that the shadows they cast created an illusion of facial features. It turns out it was just a regular hill that got a little too much credit for being photogenic. The solar system stays in place. Lie! It's zooming through space at a speed of 140 miles per second, which means that it's whizzing through the cosmos faster than a cheetah chasing its prey. It takes us 230 million years for the solar system to complete a full orbit around the Milky Way. It's a good thing it isn't getting a speeding ticket, because that would be one astronomical fine. Eh? Without the sun, planets would be pretty chilly. We're talking about temperatures as low as -455 degrees Fahrenheit. Brrr. But with the sun around, the planets get to enjoy much more livable temperatures. Of course, not all planets are created equal. Mercury, for example, is the closest to the sun. Venus, on the other hand, is farther away, but somehow manages to be even hotter than Mercury. The distance from the sun isn't the only factor that affects a planet's temperature. Other things like the planet's size and reflectivity also come into play. So Mercury being the hottest planet in our solar system is a false proposition. No, just because it's the closest one to the sun doesn't mean it's the hottest. Even though we've been deceived in some ways, that doesn't make space any less amazing. It's still a vast, beautiful, and utterly fascinating part of our universe. And there's still so much we have yet to discover. Who knows, maybe one day we'll really discover little green people out there. Or maybe we'll find out something even more incredible. Until then, we'll just have to keep dreaming and exploring. There, you got 14 things on our list. Do you have any other space myths to debunk?
Now, I don't want to spook you, but there's a chance that our entire Milky Way galaxy is located in the so-called space void. It's a region where there's relatively little matter compared to other corners of the known universe, and it's much less dense than it is elsewhere in the universe. In other words, we might exist in an air bubble in a cake. If that's true, it would mean that we're even lonelier than we thought. In our universe, all the galaxies are constantly moving away from each other. In order to understand how far they move away, scientists use something called the Hubble-Lemaitre constant. It's like a speedometer, but for galaxies. However, there's a cosmic mystery called the Hubble tension. It's challenging what we know about the universe's expansion. Scientists used to consider the Hubble-Lemaitre constant a reliable guide, but our recent observations question this reliability. The speeds we see in real life don't match up with the distances we calculated and expected. They aren't sure why these measurements don't add up. Researchers followed the moves of supernovas and saw that the universe seems to expand faster around us than it does overall, as if it's actively avoiding us specifically. After considering this, they began to assume that we might all live in a cosmic void. Some of them are especially large. They're known as supervoids. The largest known one was creatively named Giant Void. Ooh. It's so big, it's impossible for us to even imagine. 1.5 billion light-years away, with a diameter of 1 to 1.3 billion light-years. Yeah, it's basically a big dark vacuum. But even this giant vacuum isn't entirely empty. The Giant Void houses 17 separate galaxy clusters within its expanse. However, it might not be the biggest emptiness in our universe. There's this thing called the CMB cold spot. It's this unusually large and chilly area of our universe that we saw through the microwaves. It really stood out on the map of our universe with its unexpectedly low temperatures, and scientists have spent many years trying to figure out what the thing is. In 2015, scientists proposed that this place might be a supervoid, and probably the largest one ever. Being even more original with this one, they called it the Great Void. If it's true, this place would be an emptiness of about 1.8 billion light-years in diameter, about 1,000 times larger than typical voids. Not everyone thinks that's possible, so scientists keep arguing over this one. There's another interesting theory going about this place. One researcher suggested that this place might have been a trace on our collision with a parallel world. It's a pretty bold hypothesis, but unfortunately, there's no way for us to confirm or deny it with our current technologies. In any case, as the universe expands, these voids will grow, and the walls connecting galaxy clusters will stretch and break. Eventually, the voids will merge, leaving gravitationally bound galaxy clusters as islands in the expanding emptiness. In other words, sooner or later, the great emptiness will consume everything in our world. So, it turns out we might be a rare occasion in a supervoid, one of the 15% of matter. This would explain why we're surrounded by relatively few galaxies. This discovery, if true, challenges the standard model of cosmology, which we created with Albert Einstein's help. It would mean that gravity in general behaves differently than what we expected. According to the standard model, such a significant underdensity shouldn't exist. Because of that, scientists will have to explore and consider this idea thoroughly. It might just challenge our very basic understanding of physics. The scientists call this the local hole. The discovery of the local hole may hold clues to explaining the Fermi paradox. Maybe in this specific part of the universe, where we hang out, the chance of intelligent life developing anywhere nearby is very low. Perhaps all of the sentient beings hang out somewhere beyond our supervoid. But that doesn't mean we should lose hope, or that life anywhere nearby is impossible. In fact, life in the universe might be much more common than we previously thought. We know that the inner planets, like Mercury and Venus, are inhospitable due to extreme conditions. However, Venus looks interesting because even though it's a crazy toxic planet, scientists believe that it was very Earth-like in the past. It could have even hosted life. Unfortunately, it was too close to the Sun and all the nice conditions evaporated over time. But there's a possibility of microbial life surviving in its high-altitude clouds. Mars, a cold desert, also might have been a friendlier place in the past with rivers and lakes. Though now it lacks a protective atmosphere, ancient life might have existed there. In that case, it would leave potential fossils and underground microbes could still survive. We've discovered some signs of them, but are still debating whether this stuff was truly organic or not. The gas giants, like Jupiter and Saturn, and ice giants are not ideal for life, but their moons offer hope. Europa has an ocean beneath its icy surface, making it a potential hotspot. Enceladus releases water into space, carrying complex molecules that hint at interesting possibilities. And Titan is especially unique. It has liquid bodies on its surface, rivers and lakes of hydrocarbons. While its frigid temperatures aren't great for life, scientists ponder if it might host life with a different kind of chemistry. However, it will take us decades to check all these celestial bodies and study them properly. We haven't sent anything so far since the times of Voyager 2, but if we're lucky, we might explore our solar system during the 21st century. In any case, There's a lot of potential for life even in our solar system alone, not even mentioning all the planets and galaxies we found nearby. Our estimates suggest that the observable universe, the one we can see, might host around 5.3 trillion habitable worlds. One of the most likely candidates so far is Kepler 186f. It's a potential Earth-like planet, just 10% larger than Earth. This planet orbits a red dwarf star, which is a star a bit dimmer, colder, but more long-living than our Sun. And it's only about 490 light-years away, which may sound like a lot, but remember what distances we've discussed with supervoids. So even if we really are in a supervoid, we're still lucky to have many galaxies and planets around. And if one day we'll find a way to travel through the universe, leaving the local hole probably wouldn't be a problem.